Hey guys, Dr. Jake Dodds here, and we're back with a new video, and I'm really excited about this because we're still talking about those foundational pieces of health. Last week we talked about structure. This week we're going to be talking about things that give energy. Now when we're talking about giving energy, there's three primary categories that come up, and we're going to break down each one in detail, and we're going to also give over the problem that comes up with each one of those as people are trying to make health decisions and get better with their migraine headaches. So the first one we're going to talk about is called biochemistry. Now, it sounds like a scary word. It's really simple. It just means that we have chemistry, the interaction of molecules, as it relates to our biology as human beings. Biochemistry. So there's a couple things that fall under this umbrella. The first is going to be our food and water. And actually, let's also put supplements in here too. So things we're putting into our body and how that's reacting with ourselves and our overall health. Now, people talk about getting good food, get good water, you get that right combination of supplements, your body will have everything it needs to be healthy is the story that we're told, right? Along those same lines, we also have exercise. So, if you move the right way, if you get out there and you run 5 miles every day, you're gonna feel awesome, right? So, as a lot of you know, or maybe have tried yourself, the story isn't always that simple. So the first thing that comes up is there's a lot of confusion out there, right? Tons of information. Everyone's telling you to do something different. You've maybe tried a lot of these different things yourself, and it can be really frustrating. So the first problem that we have under biochemistry is there's a lot of confusion that comes up. Now, the second thing is, and I think this is even more important, is this is where a lot of the conversation around health happens. So a lot of times we're putting all our eggs into this biochemical basket. So we end up in this wild goose chase of like, hey, biochemistry is it. Like if we just get that right combination of exercise and I take all this perfect amount of supplements, then boom, I'm gonna be able to do things like get rid of my migraine headaches or feel awesome or have the energy that I want. So we got everything in one basket is the second problem that comes up here. And the reason it's a problem is because we have two other really big categories that are very important to consider, and they all work off each other. So sometimes issues with biochemistry can actually come as a ripple effect from these other categories. Now, category number 2 is another sciencey word, and we got circadian rhythm. Maybe you've heard that word, maybe you haven't. It doesn't really matter either way, because what we got going on here is essentially equates to sleep, right? We have normal biological rhythms within the body. They happen over different periods of time if it's within a 24-hour period called circadian rhythm. So the big one here is sleep. And there is a fair amount of conversation going on this as well, but it's all the stuff that we heard in grade school, right? Like get 8 hours a night, go to bed on time, wake up 8 hours later, you're recharged, you're ready to go. And sleep obviously is really important, so I'm not discounting any of this. The problem that comes up with sleep and what I've worked with people is a lot of people, everyone knows this, right? Everyone knows they need to sleep and they know it's good to get 7 or 8 hours a night. So it's never an issue of like, oh yeah, okay, I'll just go sleep 7 or 8 hours a night. It's an issue of, hey, I'm trying, but when I go to bed, I can't sleep or I can't stay asleep. And so the whole thing is automatic. So it's a little bit different than biochemistry here, because like here you're making a decision of what you're chewing and putting in your mouth. Circadian rhythm is like, hey, I'm going to bed and like my body doesn't seem like it is doing what it should be doing and going to sleep. Or sometimes people sleep for 8 hours and it's like, hey, I'm actually sleeping like 8, 10 hours and I wake up and I still feel like I got hit by a truck. So like what's going on here? So circadian rhythm, sleep, really important, but as we're having that conversation, we need to recognize it's another one of these body systems that's completely automatic. So as we take this step back, again, we need to recognize not just, hey, sleep is important, but what are the factors around sleep that are gonna influence that where you can get to it automatically and get to a better place for yourself. Now the last category is the one I'm the most excited to talk about today because it's a category that a lot of people don't even know exists, even though the new science is saying that as much as 2/3 of our energy production is coming from this category. So let's imagine that. So what we're talking about here is we got biophysics. So biophysics, we got the study of light, we got the study of electrons and how that influences the human body. And a lot of people, myself included, when I first heard this, I was like, what is this craziness? We have light and electrons that's like affecting how our body functions. And it's really cool now because we're getting to the point of technology where we're able to see things that we weren't before. And some of these long held beliefs, we're starting to see that there's a lot more down this wormhole than we ever thought possible. And light and electrons falls right into that basket. Now, and it's funny because, again, I had this initial reaction like, what on earth are you talking about with like light and electrons? Like, how on earth would that like ever affect your health? So it's one of these things that we kind of take for granted because, again, like when our biology was put into our bodies, it was back when the lights didn't exist, we didn't have TV, there was no internet, there was no Wi-Fi. So that's what we've like developed around. And I mean, you look out the window and like, so take birds for example, like they fly, some birds are migrating, they're flying south every year, and it's like, oh yeah. And if you really stop and think about it, it's like, how do they do that? And it's because they're using cues from nature and they're using cues from the sun, like the days start to get shorter. They have this internal ticker that goes off of like, hey, it's starting to get colder, I better get out of here. But that's all run automatically by external cues that are coming in that set off these certain set of behaviors. And we tend to think of ourselves as like so different from like the animals that we're seeing outside. But again, our biology is built around when we didn't have any of this stuff. There wasn't the lights and the heat and all that. So our bodies are really dependent as well on seasonal changes and what's happening with the sun. Because our survival would be dependent around that. Like if it's getting really cold outside and the days are getting shorter, there's less food available. Like if our body's still burning like it's the middle of summer and we have all the food available in the world, like that could have actually impacted our survival. So again, we don't really think about it a whole lot, but our body has a ton of cues that it takes from the sun especially, and also the environment in general. So light, electrons is actually a primary driver for your whole system. So again, what we have is kind of this circular thing going on here. We have the biophysics, which then affects the biochemistry. So, I mean, you may have noticed in the winter as well, like you may even feel a little more tired. Like there's metabolic shifts that happen based on the light that's coming into our eyeballs that again dictates hormonal shifts, metabolic rates, even things as intricate as energy production and detox reactions. So again, the biophysics here is driving the biochemistry, but this stuff never gets talked about. Like when's the last time that somebody talked to you about electrons when they talked about getting more energy into your body? But guess what? Our body actually generates energy through something called an electron transport chain. So it's a really direct fuel into this motor that drives our whole body. But a lot of times, again, we're just talking about like the food and the water that we're drinking, and we're not really appreciating this whole cascade of events. Because once we have the biophysics right, the biochemistry starts doing things more appropriately, and then guess what? The circadian rhythm starts clicking into place. So we have this whole circular action, but if you're only focusing on the biochemistry, then we kind of have this stuck loop, and we just have the biochemistry is kind of messed up, the sleep isn't happening appropriately, and it's like, hey, we're not even thinking about anything with the biophysics. So this is our overview video, and obviously we have a lot of details in here that we're going to unpack, and I'm really excited to dive into each one of these topics with you because even though it can seem really overwhelming, there's some really basic principles that you can use to make these decisions for yourself to make a move forward on something that seems as complex as migraine headaches. Because again, at our core, we all have these foundational layers that drive how our health and our bodies functions. And if we get a better handle on that, we get more control over our healing process and we have more control about how we want to feel in our lives. So stay tuned for future videos. We're going to unpack this more. Check out the free guide and the link that we got for you that's going to be talking more about an easy win that you can get to get the ball rolling when we're talking about giving your body energy. So check that out. Looking forward to talking more in future videos.